Hi, I'm Imogen Blood, and in this, the first episode of season two of Change Talk, I'm joined by Sarah Day, who's Chief Executive of Practice Solutions. Practice Solutions works across social care, health, and public services in Wales, providing support, facilitation, and consultancy. Sarah and I have worked together for the best part of a decade, and I'm especially honoured that she's carved out time for this conversation, given that she's just been awarded an MBE for services to social care. Sarah and I share a passion for thinking about how innovation and technology might help us to do things differently. Many of us are finding more efficient ways to do things using AI and other forms of tech. But is there a risk that as we get more efficient, we simply end up doing more? This feels particularly pertinent in social care, where services are under enormous pressure to cope with rising demand. How can we make sure we use AI to improve the quality and depth of our work, not just the pace and breadth? Sarah and I reflect on the different ways in which AI can be used to support better and more relational practice. For example, helping us put aside the assessment forms and have more present human conversations with people, and how it might help us improve our learning and development. But there are also many risks here, and we talk about what is needed in terms of leadership, investment, and strategy to maximise the opportunities and minimise the risks. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did. Great. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Sarah Day. We've worked together for many years, Sarah, and it's really, really nice to welcome you here to Change Talk today. And we're going to talk a bit about AI and social care. But before we jump into that, I sort of thought it'd be useful just to start off by defining both of those terms, actually, because AI is, kind of widely used all over the place. I think we're all sort of slightly losing track of what we really mean by AI, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But social care is also, needs a little bit of pinning down. So tell us first of all, what you kind of mean by AI, Sarah. How do you think of AI?
Well, I first of all have to say that I agree with you that I think AI can mean so many different things to so many people, and it depends what industry you're in as to what value it may have
Mm,
for that industry. So I can't begin to be an expert on AI, but what I have seen develop over, I would say, certainly the last 3 year, maybe 3, 4 years is, AI has become more of a word or a phrase we use within our everyday lives. And I'm a curious person. I've always loved technology. I've got a mind which will always think about how we can make lives better through the use of technology. So within the context of our world in social care, I think that AI has a role to play in helping us make really complex systems and processes more efficient. Uh, I actually am of the belief that AI within social care can help us ensure that the voices of those people that we support within the context of social care, I feel it can help to amplify those,
mm,
or it has the potential to amplify those voices. I think AI has the potential to help um, help professionals who are under pressure, who need some advice and guidance, like a critical friend. Okay, we know it's not a human being, but sometimes you can be really stuck for ideas about how to support an individual. So, is there potential for AI to be used by practitioners to help us, spark ideas in our minds to think about how we might want to go about supporting people and, address challenges that people might be experiencing. I think that AI within social care can help us get better at how we collect data and then use that data to plan services for the future.
mm,
Um, and and I think that, we're certainly on a journey to start looking at how that will happen within social care. Um, and and that journey will take time, but it's a journey that we're all on.
Mm,
And so whilst I don't think it's the panacea, absolutely not. I think we are, I think probably it's safe to say within the whole of the UK, we have a system that is under immense pressure.
yeah.
We have spiraling costs. We need
Mm,
to do something differently in
mm,
order to be able to meet the demand of individuals. So if AI can certainly support, never replace, but support people
mm,
to do their job better,
mm.
then we need to take full advantage of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that's my position
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what where I think AI can,
Mm,
uh, that's the starting point. And I'm
mm,
sure throughout our discussion we may think
mm.
that there are other solutions that it could be used for.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for anyone who's listening who perhaps doesn't kind of use the word social care very often in their lives, what are we talking about when how do you think of social care? What kind of services are we including in that umbrella?
Well, I think that it's interesting, isn't it? Because we probably only come to understand what social care is when there's a problem in our lives.
Yeah.
So social care services are those services that people can call upon when we get older, so we may need support to live good lives.
Mm,
We may, through no fault of our own, as we're bringing up children, face issues where actually the state or social services need to become involved in our lives. So, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean that that's a bad thing. It
mm.
can be a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's services that wrap around people to help them to live well. I think, though, that probably what we have, created in the last 20 years is an expectation that social services will be able to do everything
Mm,
and anything for us when we hit a problem or an issue.
mm,
Um, and actually, with the when the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act came about in 2014, there was very much not only a focus on how we make individuals who are receiving or accessing care and support services um, central to the services in which they would receive. Um, I think also that legislation also gave opportunity for people to think about what they could do for themselves
yeah.
as well. So the role of social care is not just about having a transaction, using a transactional service. Actually, the role of social care and social workers
Mm,
is about how we work in a positive way with people to make them realize all of the assets that they do have around them. But I think that, yeah, the maybe the last 20, 30 years have created an expectation that when that new legislation came in and maybe people were assessed differently, it's shifting a culture where we don't get, I think, we don't get the opportunity to shout about all of the amazing work that social care
mm,
does for people day in, day out.
mm,
So, at the moment, we hear very much about the demand on other parts of the system, for example, the NHS. And it
mm,
always, I was listening to a news report last night about a hospital in Wales under immense strain, and they talk about the pressure. And then at the end, there's a comma, and they say because of social care or lack of
yeah, yeah,
service. We're waiting to get people out of hospital, and that's
mm,
social care's problem. But
yeah,
actually, what we've seen in the last couple of years is that social care services provide support to lots and lots of people every day to live good lives, but we only ever hear the bits where 20% of the population who are in hospital, and nine times, well, not nine times out of 10, that's not just a social care issue.
Yeah, there's a
That is a
yeah.
wider system issue about how we even prevent people from needing to go into hospital in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that context is really important, isn't it? I mean, we've been on a real sort of journey in social care. I'm thinking, I qualified as a social worker back in like 1997, I think, and we were just, in England anyway, we were just kind of moving towards this kind of model of social workers doing assessments and sort of bringing in kind of packages of care, which you then kind of coordinated, and somebody else came in and did all of that. And we've obviously preserved elements of that model, haven't we, throughout, right to the current day. And social workers are kind of there, kind of making assessments, trying to understand needs, thinking about how we match different services to, and we've got a whole kind of workforce of paid care workers and support workers that are, often going out to people's homes or working in, extra care housing or care homes, or a whole kind of range of services, who are actually kind of doing a lot of the day-to-day kind of direct work with people. And I suppose, like you say, we've had this kind of challenge since the Care Act and the Social Services Wellbeing Act came in, to really think about how we do all of that in a much more strength-based way and try to be more relational. But as you say, we're swimming up tide, aren't we, when we've got such kind of huge pressures of demand and so many sort of workforce challenges. It's really hard to sort of make that happen, isn't it?
I think you make a really good observation about all of the very many different roles that there are within social care that maybe we don't realise are there.
Mm,
And also, I think the other one that we should not forget is unpaid carers,
yeah.
because unpaid carers are an army of individuals who provide that kind of support day in, day out. And yeah, so it's a rich tapestry, isn't it,
It
of
is. It is.
support in our community. But sometimes it's difficult to see because we don't all wear uniforms and there's not a big building that we can all, and big flashing lights everywhere. We're quite understated.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, kind of coming back to AI then, I mean, I'm just thinking, about how AI is sort of currently being used, really. I mean, we've seen a huge kind of shift, haven't we, in all of our lives, I think. I mean, I broke my wrist just before Christmas, and, straight away found myself, not only trying to look at how I could do everything using dictation, but also thinking, I really badly need, an assistant that can just kind of, help me get through some of this work, because I'm having to do everything with one hand and it's not the hand that I usually use. So I think, we're all kind of, every day, round our dinner table at night, people are sharing, experiences of how they've been able to use AI in different ways. And social care is no different. We're experimenting with all kinds of tools. So what are you sort of seeing at the moment, Sarah, about or what's your perception about how AI is getting used by some of those different groups of people?
So I guess I've got a unique position in
Mm,
that the work that I do gives me a helicopter view of the way in which services operate across Wales, which is a really, really privileged place to be. And I would say also that um, it- so at the moment there is a lot of stuff happening within in the sector around AI. And whilst I think you're absolutely right, and I think we're probably similar types of people in that
mm,
we love AI, and I think we're probably both of the belief of we have to be able to use AI and see the benefit in order to be able to think about how it might have benefit
mm.
in other contexts. There's also a lot of people who don't
Yeah,
think that.
yeah.
So, I would, I'm just thinking back now. It's all about people. I remember meeting a really formidable woman, Lindsay Phillips. I would say yeah, probably 3 years ago. Lindsay is the Chief Digital Officer
Mm,
at the WLGA, so that's the
mm,
Welsh Local Government
mm,
Association.
mhm,
And she's like a breath of fresh air because, I would say to you 3 years ago, we weren't really talking about digital. We'd had some not great experiences of digital transformation in social care sector on big national projects, um, 10 years ago. And they didn't go as well as we probably expected or would have wanted them to have gone. But Lindsay came on the scene and we started to, and she would always say to me, don't talk to me about digital. It's not about technology. This is about transformation of services. But what the WLGA did, and I think driven by Lindsay Phillips's leadership and just tenacity and desire to want to do stuff within the sector, um, we recognised that there were different projects happening across Wales, where people like us were experimenting with stuff. So it's happening in pockets.
mm,
And but in recent years, what I've described it as is we've got lots of different people doing different stuff. Nobody's quite doing the same thing, and we're doing things 22 different times. What's the potential if we all came together to do this work together? And I talk about it just from the context of local government and local authority. So, as I said to you, I've always been interested in technology. And a couple of years ago, again, an organisation, a small organisation based in Pontcanna in Cardiff called Stable IT, they started providing our IT support for our organisation. And they then approached me and said, we've been asked to do some work. Microsoft have asked us to do some work about the potential for AI in social care. So
mm,
they came to me because it was like, you know people that we could be asking about what the potential could be. And this was in the context of Copilot. And I know that there are plenty of other tools out
yeah,
there. I
yeah,
recognize that, but I'm talking from my
yeah, yeah.
personal experience.
Microsoft is so widely used within
Yeah,
multiple
yeah, yeah,
organizations, isn't it? Let's face
yeah.
it, it's become the kind of gold standard, really. Yeah.
It is, but that piece of work was really like a stepping stone for me because it was like I made sure that Lindsay Phillips was aware of the work. I'm also I've got a really I've got an amazing job and a really privileged job to be able to engage with all of the leaders of social care in Wales. So I
Mm,
knew that this project was happening. I was able to connect Stable to people leading social care services in Wales to actually ask the question about, you know, Stable were coming in and saying, do you realize that you could do X, Y, and Z? And people were like, wow, that could be that could be amazing. That could be a game changer for us. So you know, we started looking at AI and looking at how it could be used in assessment and care management. How could it be used to manage meeting minutes, those types of administrative
mm,
processes. I know that there are also other tools out there that are like there's a tool which has got significant traction in Wales around magic notes.
oh,
So
yeah.
from what I understand is that magic notes is a tool where you can go and have a conversation with somebody, an individual, and it captures the notes. Now, I know that there are other organisations. So, for example, Stable have recently developed a tool which can do a similar but slightly different thing called Script.
Okay.
So, and then there's a tool in Wales. Like it's quite cool that we've got these tools that are being born out of Wales as well. So there's
Yeah, it's a bit
another
of a hotbed.
tool.
Mm,
I I can't remember whether that is AI based, but there's a tool called the Social Work Way, which again gives social workers the opportunity instead of having to write down copious notes, they can like record those notes in the car on the phone, which then enables them to populate forms at a later date.
right.
I guess what I'm saying is, and I've just talked about three or four different examples there. There's lots going on in
Mm.
this field of AI within social care in Wales at this current time. And what we have done recently, and again, I will credit Lindsay Phillips and her team around this. She came to meet with social services directors 2 years ago and just said, look, we're prioritizing social care
Mm.
across local government. That's our priority area. And how can we use technology to be able to help transform services that mean at the end of the day, people who are in receipt of care and support get better experiences and our workforce feel better about what they're doing because they've got the right tools to do the job to meet demand.
Mm.
So we in October there was a the launch of the digital in social care, the DISC Cymru framework. It's at the start of its journey,
Mm.
but actually what that framework, what we hope to achieve from that framework is actually let's get all of the right people in the right place to look at how we can be using technology, AI, yes, being part of that. So then it has an impact. Whether
Mm.
you're in Cardiff or Conway, we're walking, at the same pace.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? Because I think, that kind of Wild West, which you described before, where
Yeah.
you've got lots of individual innovators,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
trying out different things. It's an exciting period, isn't it? But it's not without its risks. And I think
Absolutely.
there's a lot of, rightly, there's a lot of like fear and kind of a lot of questioning about the role of AI. We've obviously got to be really careful for starters about sensitive data, haven't we? I mean, we can't be obviously it's one thing if you're in a secure kind of within a secure environment, like, Copilot within your secure Teams environment or another kind of equivalent that's got a really kind of strong GDPR focus. But we obviously can't be like popping people's sensitive case notes into Chat GTP, can we? Because that's kind of going out there into the whole wide world in a sense. So there's some kind of parameters, aren't there, and some stuff we've got to really think about.
I really think that is really important, Imogen, because what we spoke about earlier is that we're using AI as a feature within in our own personal lives. So if we're doing it, and I'm using it in work as well, um, there will be other people in, you know, there will be people accessing tools like ChatGPT as social workers, talking about these kind of cases
Mm.
where, and we have no control over that. So
No.
we've got to get in a place where we can be designing systems and tools that
Mm.
enable people to do that, but enable them to do it safely
Yeah,
and
yeah,
with the right policies and processes in place. And
absolutely.
there's a lot of pushback around AI
Mm.
as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
There are a lot of people who will go, no, I'm not using it.
Mm.
But I am of the belief that we have to start using these. This is like, I don't know if you remember, but I certainly do. When like like Windows changed to XP, and there was like this big thing, and then the internet, and oh God, we
Mm.
can't do that. This is about, I mean, what I would also say to you, Imogen,
Mm.
for me, it's people first, tech second always. We're a
Yeah.
people business,
Mm.
but there is opportunity here for us to be able to work alongside people, whether that is a social worker, a care worker, an individual themselves, to help them understand how this ultimately can have a positive impact
Yeah.
on their life.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because I guess it seems to me that the kind of focus um, thus far, and rightly so in many ways, has been around how do we make our processes more efficient. And that's obviously where AI can massively help us out. And God knows we need it in social care, where, as you say, we've got all sorts of workforce challenges, huge amounts of demand. The more efficient we can get, the better, clearly. However, I am also a little bit worried that because we've been there before, haven't we? That the more we're able to make efficiencies in this sector, that simply becomes a justification for less funding, So we've just got to be careful that we don't, the drive towards efficiency then doesn't get kind of warped in a way. And I think what I'm really excited about, and you've hinted at it quite a few times in what you've just said, Sarah, is how we can actually use, if we take this strategic view, we can actually use AI to improve the quality of our practice actually, and improve the quality of the relationships and the time that we get to spend with people in those kinds of relationships, and really kind of improve the actual service. And so I'm really keen to kind of unpick any examples you've got of what that might look like, in that it's not just about can we get through more assessments. It's about, can we do better assessments, can we improve and enrich this.
Yeah. Um, well, can I also say there's also one really important
Mm,
point of all of this,
mm,
is that I think certainly from my experience in Wales, we this is the first time that we probably within local government have had the opportunity to really think about digital technology in a strategic way. So we're doing it alongside digital experts.
mm,
And that has been interesting
mm,
in
mm,
itself, in that with a piece of work that we did last year, we needed to work alongside digital leads within
mm,
local government.
mm,
And what became really apparent to me as well is that we need to make sure that those we give people the opportunity who work in digital technology,
mm,
AI, all of those
mm,
techie people, the opportunity to be able to understand what social care is about
yeah.
and how they can help support. And that again is down to human relationships.
Yeah,
Because
massively,
if you don't
massively.
have those, you don't have very much.
Yeah,
So
yeah, massively.
that's a bit of a byproduct, but go back to what you were talking about. I mean, I what we hope to get to, and there are tools out there on the market now where instead of a social worker having to think about going to have a what matters conversation, which is really important with an individual, in imagine the situation. We may have a carer who's under pressure, has been caring for their son or daughter for a long period of time. They may have complex needs, they're under pressure. At that moment in time, you want a social worker to be going into an environment and being fully present. Now, I don't know how you can fully do that if you've either got a laptop that you're taking copious notes on, or a notepad that you're writing down. You're trying to be present, be in the moment, but also you're trying to remember what everything that you need to be
Mm,
able to document and retain.
yeah.
And then that social worker maybe needs to then go back and sit for hours at a laptop, writing up, trying to remember what they've heard before. And I think, you're asking people to be a biographer.
Mm.
That's right, a
Yeah, yeah,
biographer of
yeah, yeah.
somebody's life.
Mm,
And that's a skill to be able
yeah.
to do it well.
Mm,
And imagine if you've got loads of cases that you need to do that for. Takes
mm,
time, takes energy. And are we necessarily focused on doing the right thing?
mm,
Now there are tools that we have the potential to use. We go back to that person, that mother under an immense amount of pressure, and actually we just sit alongside that person with their consent. What we then would do is say, I'm recording this conversation about what matters to you, what's really important. I'll take a recording of the conversation. Then what I'll do is go back to the office. I don't have to worry about typing up any notes. I've
mm,
got all of the information there for me. And then actually what I am able to do with that information is populate documentation, which helps me be able to respond quicker to you. And
mm,
actually what the argument is that by using tools such as that, the individual social worker is able to spend less time trying to upload, copy and paste things to a laptop, to a computer. Let's face it, it might be that, well, I would imagine a number of social workers went into the profession not to sit at a computer. They
yeah.
went into the profession because they wanted to make change for people. So this, I think, has the potential where people have more time to
Mm.
spend with people, more time to reflect on what the solutions are, the ability maybe to have more understanding of what if we're using AI to be able to understand what's going on in our community. If we can draw on data then that enables the social worker to have, I guess, more time and opportunity to think about what what is right for this person and help that individual think about what's right for them as well.
Yeah, no, that's really, really, really interesting, Sarah. I mean, I'm struck by a few things because obviously there are concerns, aren't there, about the accuracy of AI and it's kind of
Mm.
summarizing. And I can see that. I use it quite a bit in my work to kind of do me a summary, but I'd never not then spend some time really looking at that summary in a lot of detail. But I guess we've got to compare it with what happens currently, which is a social worker trying to scribble some stuff down and then going on to the next call and probably forgetting half of what they heard the first time round. So actually, the accuracy of remembering and capturing that information is, next level from the system that you've described, isn't it, compared to the human
Think,
memory?
but what's also important, and I didn't say, was that when you will have a social worker going back to do the administration of the case, um, what what they will not be able to do is just go, oh, that's fine, and not
Yeah.
look at it. So it's the human that presses the button. They need to look at that information. They can tinker, they can change things if they think it's incorrect. They're quality assuring that information. So what we have to make sure that if we're using tools in our sector, this tool means that the buck stops with the professional.
Yeah, that's absolutely, yeah, that's really clear, isn't it? I mean, we can use it as a kind of assistant. It's almost like a keen assistant that comes and takes brilliant notes all the time and by the time we've got back to the office has pulled out the key bullet points. But we as the professional and obviously co-produced with the person, the
Yes,
citizen,
exactly.
need to be actually making the decisions about, what this care plan might look like and what sort of support the person needs.
I a couple of well, on the weekend, I happened to, like, because I'm interested in testing all of this stuff out. So I've got a 92-year-old friend who said to me, Sarah, I'm really interested in, or I really want to document my life for my grandchildren.
Mm,
And I said, I'll help you do that.
mm.
So I went over to her house. Now, this woman, she's a wonderful woman, but she's an ex-social worker
Ah.
currently. So now she's 92, still lives on her own. And we spent the first hour talking about what it was like to receive services now. She talked about her care plan. She's registered blind. She said, when I finally got to see a social worker and I asked them to read what was in my case notes to me or what in my care plan, there was, the information was factually incorrect.
Yeah.
And the most important bit of that, so it had a situation where it said for 6 months of the year her son lives in France, and for 6 months of the year her son lives with her. That's not true. But even though it had been input by a human being, a
Mm,
social worker or
mm,
a social work assistant, there was no record of who would input that information. So it wasn't signed. So there was no kind of comeback on the fact that that information was not correct. So
mm.
actually,
Yeah.
if we can use AI, there's a digital print, a footprint there
Yeah.
for the professional. So you can't get rid of the fact you've got a trail
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
information.
Mm.
And at least you will have that information to
Yeah.
be able to qualify whether it's wrong or right.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that closing the loop, isn't it? In terms of, the worker checking the AI, going back to the person hopefully, and checking that everybody's heard right, and this is what we've come out
Yeah,
with, and also management supervision in that situation. Those are the really key bits, aren't they? I think.
they are. The other thing I would say to you is, so just going back to that example with my friend, I just wanted to experience what having a conversation about somebody's life was with her.
Mm,
So I went in and I said, look, I'm going to record this conversation as I would hope that in the future we would hope that a social worker might be able to do. And I'm going to talk to you for an hour about your life.
Mm,
And actually that whole experience for me was it was really emotional. You know,
mm,
she got really emotional about her life. But I, instead of me sat there thinking, oh, I've got to note all this down, I I could be a human with
mm,
her in
mm.
that time.
Yeah.
But what I was then able to do was take the recording, and 3 days later, I've got a version of her memoirs that she can share with her grandchildren
Mm.
that I can read back to her,
Yeah.
and she can check it's okay.
Yeah. It's a
And what a
brilliant.
gift is
Yeah,
that?
it's great.
But I've used AI, and I told you know AI has helped me do that really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I experienced that as a I work as a researcher now,
Yeah.
and yeah, I've absolutely experienced that. In the past, I'd be here, I wouldn't, I'd find alternative workarounds, I guess, if I was speaking to a citizen. But with a professional, I'd be here typing away, trying to
Yeah.
capture everything
Yeah.
down while you were talking. I might take a recording for backup, just so I can go back and take quotes. But now I can have transcription on and I can pluck that transcription out at the press of a button, and then I can go back through afterwards and do all the kind of checking and the listening, and at the time I can just be fully
As
present, and I'm sure that totally changes the quality of those interactions, so I can completely imagine that on the front line. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
we do really have to address those situations about how, you know, people's fears over AI.
Mm,
You know, because I think that whilst there are some organizations, I was hearing actually of these tools, there are some agencies that won't accept
uh,
information from these tools. Like why I don't, you know, we need to do some more work, I think, about, you know, making sure that we've all got to be on the journey,
mm.
um, not just social care. This
Yeah.
is a wider issue,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know?
And your point around I think that point around transparency is really interesting. I mean, when you described the conversation you had with your friend about her life, um, I'm presuming, you were upfront about the fact that obviously you were
Yeah,
upfront about the
yeah.
recording. You've always got to be upfront about recordings, but upfront about the use of AI in that. I just wonder what do we need to be doing to be transparent about how we're using AI, both to citizens and perhaps to sort of workers? I don't know. How do we
I
conversation
think we
how
need to be open and honest in the conversation that this is the way in which we work. I mean, you know, it might be the same when years ago we used to use Word and we had spell checker. We'd say we use spell checker. This is a
Mm,
similar kind of thing. And I think the most important bit is we need to see the outcome.
yeah.
So I can, you know, so if we can demonstrate that actually this outcome has a positive impact on the individual,
Mm,
then, you know, hopefully we will be able to enable other agencies, individuals, even themselves working in social care, to see
mm,
that this has to be
mm,
the way in which we provide opportunity for people.
mm,
But we have to make sure that we do that in an ethical, safe
mm,
way where everyone feels confident about that. I mean, there are, you know, there are, I c- I understand that. And I was listening to an article or a news report a couple of weeks ago where a school was saying that, you know, there's been a rise in the number of complaints that they receive because people are using AI to help formulate, you
mm,
know, big complaints about things. You know, we've got to be realistic on when and how
mm,
this this technology can be used
yeah.
because there'll be, you know, one might argue that that's a really good thing that people feel confident to have their voice heard. But actually, do we need it to get to that point where we're writing formal letters of complaint and can't we just can't we just advise AI that maybe an informal conversation and development of relationships is the way to go first and foremost before we end up in like litigation and all of that type of
Mm,
thing. So, you know, again, it's really complex, isn't it? Because there
mm,
will be people who are using AI to make complaints about X, Y, and Z in social services as
Mm,
well.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Oh, it's complex, isn't it? There's such a lot to
so
think
complex.
about. It's really, really interesting. I mean, I'm struck. Yeah, I'm struck by. Yeah, I think that question. Yeah, I've got another question fizzing in the back of my head. But yeah, let's tackle that one while you're there. I think that point about information and what information we end up with and how we, whether that's the right information is really interesting around AI, isn't it? I mean, I was just reflecting the other day with somebody that there's such a lot of, generated material now out there in the world. You can end up with AI kind of going round in loops and actually kind of, giving you false information. And I know there's been a lot of question around sort of bias and can it kind of, if it's looking for big,
Mm,
large patterns, can it
yeah,
deal with
it
kind of
can be,
diverse
can't it?
individuals? There's lots of real, genuine kind of ethical challenges there. But I was struck, we were talking another point about a project that you're doing around young people in care, and it just seemed to really, tell us a little bit more about that because it kind of responded, I think, very nicely to these concerns about young people going off and looking at chat
Yeah.
GTP and coming back with all kinds of information that isn't always kind of constructive. So tell me a little bit about what you've been doing around that space.
So we've been for a number of years. I met a guy a number of years ago. His name's James Dovey,
Mhm.
and James is a great mind. He's a real entrepreneur, but also has a unique experiences in that he grew up for part of his childhood in foster care.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about how do we actually, like, how do we create a system? We've got children who are growing up now who, who are from a very early age tuned into devices.
Yeah.
But actually, our system, and if any child ever has to come into contact with social care, I mean, I don't have the foresight of current experience, but in my early career, I would do a lot of work in engaging with children who were care experienced. And at the time, I remember them talking about, what were the issues? And there were issues about, I don't have a phone or I don't have access to Wi-Fi. I think it's different now. And I think probably the pandemic has accelerated
True.
our ability. I remember being in projects where children were saying, I can't have a photo taken of me. And, and I used to think, that's awful. That's awful that we can't facilitate how we can save, we can take safe photographs of individuals that help document their life. And another thing has just sprung into my head, but I'll leave that one about the importance of being able to document children's lives in care. That's really important for me. Um, anyway, going back to James, he's such a smart guy and is really creative and has been talking about for a number of years developing an app. So when you are in care and you're at the age where you are going to be curious about life and what's happening, how do we create a resource that is trusted?
Mm.
So where is that single point of information that a young person can go to and find out about or ask a question of? So, we're really lucky that we're going to be doing some work in this space to start to think about getting a minimal viable product for young people who are currently living in foster care and in residential care in Wales to think about how we can create and validate information that can help them get the right information at the right time. And that kind of approach, also what we've talked about is making sure that individuals, so we don't all know the right answer, do we? But together we can do more. So how can we use this project as well to be able to um, give young people the opportunity to contribute to that information, which then in turn gives them experience of doing some, I think, quite cool forward thinking stuff that gives them skills and experiences that they can take into the next chapter of their life. You know,
Mm,
and James talks about, I don't want this just to be a tool that could be used by children who are looked after. You know, we've got a whole community of people who access services, whether we're young, old, physically, live with physical impairments, live with learning difficulty. We need to be harnessing the power of that kind of stuff. So we're really excited about what that what that will mean and what impact that will have on making sure that actually we're giving young people the right as much information as we can do about their situation and circumstance.
right. And presumably, if I'm understanding correctly, then um, the idea would be that, you build a body of information, of data, of shared experience, of, kind of messages that
Yeah.
people would give to their younger selves and all that type of thing.
Mm, mm,
Information that's
mm.
from trusted sources, and you build that body of information, but then you maybe use an AI kind of interface with that information so that if a young person wants to chat, with a bot, or perhaps has a question that doesn't appear in the preset kind of question and answer section, they can tap into that whole resource. Is that the vision roughly, or?
So I think that's the vision. We're not there yet. We
No.
need to we
Oh.
need to do so. It's from what I understand, the tool is being developed with the thought that potentially AI could be
Mm,
turned on and off on the
yeah.
system.
Mm,
But there's a lot of work that we need to do
mm, mm,
in the lead up to that to make sure that we're doing it ethically, we're
mm,
doing it in a way that people feel safe and comfortable. And
mm,
that's not going to be a short, sharp piece of work. That's going to be, you
mm,
know, even having that information portal for young people
mm.
will be a massive thing
Yeah, yeah,
for 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 us in Wales.
yeah.
But that information could be not only, does the tool or the app or the infrastructure lend itself to other communities.
Mm,
You think about the kind of information that could be on there, could be helpful to foster carers, could be
mm,
helpful to other professionals about how we get in the space to be able to understand, you know, what's important to young people.
yeah. How do you use that? The questions that people ask, as well as the,
Yeah, and
yeah.
that's the potential. I mean, that's the potential
Mm,
for when we turn on. I say it's like it's a given.
yeah.
If the opportunity to use AI is there, I mean, that's I think is really exciting because potentially there is opportunity, providing that we've got all of the right
Mm,
data processes in place to be able to use the questions that people are asking of the tool to help shape services for the future.
mm, mm,
At the
mm,
moment, I think we also have, not at the moment, it is a thing. It's a thing that we, the way in which we document people's lives
mm.
isn't good enough. It's
Yeah.
not good enough. And
Mm,
I've been involved in conversations with people only last week, as I've just said. What does it mean when people who are meant to be documenting information about my life that's factually incorrect, what
mm,
impact does that have?
mm.
You
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and also I think I'm going off on another tangent here, but I also think that we also uh, I hear repeatedly, I have to repeat, when you're speaking to people who access services and have the need to access a number of services, I've had many a conversation with people about them having to repeat their story. I have to retell my story 10 times. That's really traumatizing.
You've got to get
This
better.
kind of way of working
Mm,
has the opportunity,
mm,
not this, I think AI in general
mm,
has the opportunity for us to really, as I said right at the beginning of our conversation, amplify the voices of people
mm.
so that they don't have to do that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that's come up quite a few times in my conversations and training around sort of how we make practice better, how we improve our kind of practice, is this challenge that a lot of practitioners have around having to fill forms in. You've got an assessment form you've got to fill in. Obviously, there are some questions, factual questions we need to ask of people, and you just kind of fill those in. But what I've heard time and time again in the training room and in conversations I've had with people is that actually, the most meaningful conversations we have and the ones that actually give us the most insight into what matters to people happen when we put the form down,
Yeah.
or when we ignore the bloody form and think, I'll sort that out when I get back to the office. And we just kind of have what we view as a human conversation. It's quite interesting. People often don't even view that as an assessment. It's like, oh, we had this conversation. And that's where I really started to understand what makes this person tick and really had some ideas around how I can best support the person. But it's almost like we're having to go around the back of the forms, go around the back of the processes to sort of have those conversations. And it just strikes me that what you're describing here could potentially give us control back over over how we run these conversations, and the forms can be doing their own thing in the background almost with the help of AI. And that feels like it could be really transformative of practice, I think.
I think so. I think it's like, the whole word assessment and
Mm,
we say, don't we, it's a what matters a conversation, but really we're filling in a form. Well,
mm,
I know I'm really not very good at filling in forms anyway. So that's
mm,
a barrier for me. I'm really good at having conversations.
mm,
Don't ever ask me to fill in a form because I'll get it wrong. Anyway, um, it's about, but also that whole word of assessment,
mm,
I think changes the mindset for, so if you're going to assess me, I expect that you're going to make my life better. If we're having a conversation, then that's me taking responsibility for how I might make my life better
mm.
myself. It's like the words and language are so important.
Yeah.
Like the word service user, for me, I never use that
Mm,
word,
mm,
and
mm,
that was drummed into me by a guy who I had the real pleasure and fortune of working with, a guy called Vin West, who
oh,
was
yeah, I know
an
Vin.
MP. Do you remember Vin?
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing guy. And he was really, really quite defiant about we do, if we use the word service user, it's a passive,
Mm,
I'm passive. I have no kind
mm,
of ownership
mm,
over the service that I
mm,
use. So yeah, I just think if yeah, we've got to create different ways of doing things to
mm.
bring back the joy. And I'm not a social worker. I'm an honorary. I call myself an honorary. Can I say that word? Honorary,
Honorary, only just. Yeah.
something like that. I'm one of those
Yeah.
because my parents were social workers, so I grew
Okay.
up
It's in the
in that
blood.
context.
Yeah.
It's in the blood somewhere. Um, and I just think social work has such an important part to play in our society. And we just need to be able to think creatively about how, and what I was saying, people talk a lot about reclaiming social work,
Mm,
don't they? And
mm.
that to me is about the human to human
Yeah.
contact. So we have to create time, we have to create space, we have to safeguard that, the
Mm,
preciousness of that
mm.
time,
Yeah.
and then maybe we'll see a shift in the fact that we've got loads of people wanting to work in social care to help people make the changes that are needed in their life. And I
Mm,
think also what we can do is what I also see is this is a system that continually is responding to pressure and reacting to
mm,
situations.
mm,
If we've got more time to think, we've got more time to think creatively about preventative measures, what we might, be doing to work with people in a way that, when a problem is, it's almost like at the moment, and I know this speaking with friends who live with physical disability or lifelong need or
mm,
requirement for services. I ask the question, do you have a social worker? And it's like, no, I don't. I'm banked.
mm.
Banked. Have you heard
Oh,
that phrase?
no, I
Banked.
haven't. No, banked.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
banked. So it's like I haven't got a problem. So therefore I don't have that relationship until another problem happens. So how can we start to tip the balance where anyone who has a relationship with social services, it can be about the good stuff as well as the not so good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so interesting. I'm just reflecting back, I spent about 10 years on a panel overseeing or advising an EU funding program called the Active Assisted Living Program. And, we kind of gave out grants to multinational kind of tech and real life kind of researchers, service providers to sort of look at where technology could most kind of influence the kind
Yes,
of
I
world
remember
of
that.
care and inclusive living. And I remember like reviewing various projects where the idea was we were creating care robots, and really reflecting on the sort of ethics of all that. And it just feels like, yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? That actually now we're here with the tool like AI, which potentially can actually kind of take us closer towards really valuing the human reactions, interreactions that we have, rather than thinking that we're going to start sending robots out to kind of provide care to older
Yeah.
people. It just feels like we've come round in this real circle. It feels really, it feels really exciting.
Mm. But let's not forget that some people might prefer a robot, and that's their choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's not to knock robots. I think, there are
Yeah.
definitely, aspects of life that we
Yeah.
can, we can sort of look to. I mean, I guess just to wrap us up, Sarah, there's lots of, we've sort of like surfed through the highs and the lows and the opportunities, loads of great examples en route. And I think this point that sort of we keep coming back to is the need to take quite a strategic approach, because as with any other agenda, there are risks that it gets wild wested and everybody does their own thing and it all goes a bit, and then we all get scared of AI because it's gone wrong on too many occasions,
Mm.
or that, it just gets taken along as yet another kind of efficiency drive and, we lose out on all the kind of values and the kind of, or that, the tech guys just come in and make it all up and it doesn't really fit with what we're trying to do. So this sense that we need a really strategic approach feels like a really clear message from what you've been talking about. And I just wonder, what needs to happen next to realize this vision? What do we need to sort of make this happen? What's the ask at different levels?
Well, I think I am a firm believer and champion that actually we need to lead the way in doing this this work. We need to understand what we're talking about as leaders within social care about AI. We can't leave it to somebody else and it be somebody else's job to think about that. I think we all have a responsibility to actually understand the potential of the tool for ourselves. And then I think we need to champion investment in this space because we need that support to be able to realize the impact of it. I think also we need to create a space and opportunity for people at all levels of the sector to be curious about what AI can bring. Like again, I've had several conversations about the fact that, there are still organizations or there are still services that are paper-based services.
Mm.
That is not good enough.
Mm.
And because that does a disservice not only to the people who are in receipt of care and support, it does a disservice to our workforce. And actually, technology now is such an integral part of the majority of people who are working age. People will go, I'm not using that device, or that's Big Brother, or whatever. But then they'll go and spend probably their lunch hour on TikTok or Facebook or whatever. And I guess what I urge people to do is at all times think about how could my life be made easier by the use of technology? Because there will be people who have wonderful ideas. The point is that they never go anywhere because people don't know how or who to ask, or we've got leaders who maybe again, I've had many conversations with people that say I'm really bad at computers or I'm really
Mm.
bad at technology. I think, the changes that happened when COVID happened meant that if you weren't technologically literate and leading services meant you had a massive learning curve. And I don't think we can afford to work in these services now without a mind to digital.
Yeah.
So what are we doing in terms of, what, and I haven't looked at a job description for, say, a director of social service, head of manager, whatever. I don't know whether we've still got the line must be proficient in using XP or sorry, PowerPoint, Word, and
Mm,
maybe we might have a bit of Teams now. I don't know, but
mm,
we need a whole system shift to
mm.
the way in which um, we consider technology, digital transformation, AI to be part of services for the future. And that starts with us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's really key. And I suppose I would add to that list as an evaluator, we need to evaluate. We need to evaluate
Yeah,
that in really
good
kind of,
point.
really sort of democratic, inclusive ways. It's not just
Yeah,
about let's get some indicators and see, but we really need to create those kind of action learning spaces, don't we, where people can
you're absolutely right.
reflect on what's working, can think about the barriers and how it makes them feel, how it does or doesn't improve relationships on all sides, not just
Yeah.
workers but and managers, but also people that we engage with members of the public, to really kind of think about how we make sure we use this tool in a truly kind of positive and transformative way.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think also, so yes, I 100% agree with that. But I also think that we need to be working alongside education and universities as well to think about the future of social work. You
Yeah,
know, if if we're not thinking about how, again, we need research, we need evidence to be able to support how we train our social workers of the
mm,
future.
mm,
And that needs to have, some element, an underlying bit around how we can all be using digital to, make our jobs easier and lives better.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sarah. That's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time and your
Pleasure.
insight and your experience. Really, really useful.
I could talk for hours about the subject, and for me, it's a real privilege. I feel really privileged to be involved in this type of work, and I am committed to making sure that we don't ever we bring it in to the we embrace it as
Yeah.
opposed to thinking that it's that thing over there that we don't ever use. So
Yeah. And we leave, like you say, we leave someone else to work it out because we don't really know what
yeah,
we're doing with technology and it all sounds
yeah,
a bit scary. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Thank you.